So an attorney and avid photographer who's known to his followers as Jag has caused quite a stir on social media, Twitter to be more specific, after announcing that he's had an irreversible vasectomy. In fact, at the age of 29, he's currently unmarried and without any children. A personal decision has now given him the platform to try and educate others in part, but he's also faced harsh criticism on social media. Now, Jag has actually agreed to speak to us about his own experience this morning, but also joining us for perspective about the many other issues that came from the backlash is men's health expert, Dr. Shingai Mutambirwa. To both our guests, thanks very much indeed for making time. Great to see you. Jag, let me begin with you. Not that you haven't said enough about what you've gone through and what you've taken from it. In fact, you've already come out to say that you didn't expect the kind of reaction you got when you announced your decision on social media. For those who missed it, how would you characterize how people responded to what you've done?
So thank you for having me, first of all, this morning to talk about this issue and also the response to it. And yes, I did not at all expect this reaction. What had initially happened with me is that I made my post saying that I wanted to do a vasectomy for a while. I finally had the chance to do it. So on the day of the vasectomy, I was really just announcing that it is finally done, and I'm grateful for everyone who had helped me along the way. And I thought it would just be, my small community of friends who understood. And then a couple of hours in, it was the talk of the town.
Yeah.
So it all just, blew up without me expecting any of it.
And what were people saying generally? Because the responses weren't just on the timeline, so to speak, but some of it were directly to you through DM, so to speak, a direct message.
Yes, yeah. The initial part of the response was really just a lot of hate in my DMs, men DMing me directly to tell me that this has to be the dumbest thing that they've ever seen. I have forfeited my manhood. I've lost my masculinity. And of course, as the doctor will explain in a second, the absolute confusion about what the process means, where a lot of men were angry saying that I've just had my testicles removed. So there was a lot of flack happening in my DMs and my mentions and quote tweets everywhere.
Yeah. We'll bring in Dr. Shingai in just a moment, but many people are obviously watching you. They've heard that you're 29 years old, and they're wondering, why did you decide to have a vasectomy?
So it wasn't an active decision in the sense that there was a day somewhere in the recent past where I decided this is something to do. It was more informed by my life so far, in the sense that there was no point where I ever had any desire to have children or foresaw the idea of that traditional family structure as being a part of my adult life. So I've always known that, and my friends who've been friends with me for 20 plus years, I've always known that. All I needed was just the solution. How do I ensure that I never have children? So really all it came down to is researching how to ensure that, and that's when the vasectomy happened. I was just at a point now where I could do it, so I did it.
Absolutely. We'll talk a bit more about that in just a moment. Dr. Shingai, you've been listening in. I have no doubt you've come across what Jag has done and the response to it. But as a start, basics. What is a vasectomy and what is it not?
Okay. I think that's thanks for the invitation, and hi, Jag. Essentially, when you're looking at contraception for men, there's only essentially three things that we currently have that as a man, can reasonably use for their own protection against having babies if they don't want to have children. One is condoms, which are obviously user dependent, and they're looking probably around 80-90% success if you use them appropriately, which a lot of men do not, because if you're using them with gels and stuff which are petroleum, they can actually damage that as well. The second is withdrawal, which is really a very inefficient method of controlling your reproductive potential. You're probably looking anywhere between 5 and 30% success with that. And then the third one is a vasectomy. And essentially, to make it simple, it's got nothing to do with the erections. It's got nothing to do with sexuality. It's got nothing to do with even the way your semen looks, to be honest, because what's happening is the testicles produce sperm. They travel through a tube called the vas, which is quite long. It's about 30 centimeters, running towards something called the prostate, which is a little like a lump just below the bladder. And what's happening with the prostate is that most of what a guy ejaculates is actually not sperm. Less than 1% is sperm. Most of what's coming out, stuff made by this prostate and another gland called the seminal vesicle. These are sugars, proteins, and such that support the sperm outside the body. So if you have a vasectomy, your erections are going to be the same. Your intimacy is going to be the same. Your ejaculation is going to look exactly the same as well. But there are a couple of caveats that we have to bring in. First of all, because there's a queue of sperm, we usually tie the tubes very close to where the testicles are on both sides, sort of like roadblocks on both sides. And there's still a queue of sperm. So it takes about 3 months of regular sex after that to empty all of these sperm. So you're still going to be fertile for about 3 months. Second thing is that it doesn't affect your sex life. It really has no impact. And thirdly is that although you'd be calling it irreversible, technically we can actually reverse them in about 80% of guys. But I think in a country such as ours, which has so much patriarchy, and guys sort of abdicate from their power for actually to take control of sexual health and in interrelation with partners, be them male or female or whoever it is. I think it's a very reasonable choice for a person to do that because women are often subjected to tubal ligations, which block the tubes. A much bigger procedure, much more dangerous, much more. A vasectomy is such a Mickey Mouse condition, and I must throw it out there that a JAG is by far not the youngest patient I've done a vasectomy on without children.
Really? Are you able to tell us who the youngest patient you've ever dealt with?
The youngest I actually had.
Their age is what I meant.
He was 19.
Wow.
And the thing is, I went through a long discussion with him. I explained to him about what's going on, that he's still just going through puberty, but it's he's in an adult situation. He's made a decision for himself. He wants to do it carefully. He wants to do it under guidance. I explained to him about the situation. I even said, do you want me to send you to a reproductive health people to see what's going on? He said, no, he's quite comfortable. He understands. He researched because he knows that besides the fact that we can reverse vasectomies in about 80%, not all, but 80%, even if you're looking to, there's still sperm being made in the testicles. So technically, we can actually remove sperm from the testicle and use those to make a person fall pregnant if necessary. So it's not a complete train smash, but I think they have to be understanding. They have to understand what the reasoning is. And then after that, we can see what's going on for the patient, because they are adults. They can make their own decisions once they've had the information.
Right. So there are other ways to have biological children, so to speak, even after having a vasectomy. But what you've mentioned, Dr. Shingai, does bring into sharp focus so many other social issues, especially when it comes to how men respond to this idea of being able to procreate. I mean, Jack, what have you read into some of the responses that you've received specifically from men? Because I imagine you've had some time to reflect on this and make some kind of conclusion.
I think it's great that the doctor mentioned all of those ways in which you could still have a biological child. And I think that highlights the issue that a lot of men have had with my choice to have a vasectomy, is that what I've read from a lot of the negative comments I've received is it's about the control of the situation and the power in knowing that you hold on to that at any given point. If you just refuse to, for example, end, the sex act before that point, you hold the power over the woman's body in that moment. And I think knowing that that is constantly within your control puts you in that space where we continue to, uphold these patriarchal standards where we control what happens with women's bodies as opposed to the other way around. The duty still remains on the women to prevent pregnancy. And here we have this option which, like the doctor said, it's not even a complete end to being able to have biological children. But the fact that we could take control of this, we could hold on the burden, a minor burden, in comparison to what women have to go through, is just too much for a lot of men to take. I would have made this decision at 19 if I knew I could have. I kind of assumed that for a while I would not be allowed to, but I'm glad to hear that there are men as young as 19 making that decision, because the fact that we can still choose is great, whereas if you go for a hysterectomy or tubal ligation, that complicates things so much more for the woman having to make that choice.
Yeah, it goes to show how little we do know about men's health. But Jack, you've also had men come to you wanting to actually undergo this procedure, but were shy to, I guess, approach you in public, for lack of a better term, revealing the kind of stigma, dare I say, that still exists around even having a vasectomy.
Yes, I'd say out of the maybe now 100 men, to give a round number, who have asked me for details on this, maybe only 5 have asked directly on the timeline. I received many DMs where men came out and said, listen, I've thought about this for a long time, or I now have 2 children, I'm done. Can you please give me the details of where I can do this? And that really shows that we aren't anywhere near the space where we can talk comfortably about male reproductive health as men. And this is the issue, is that, you know, when I come out and speak about this, I'm trying to normalize talking about these things because that's how we learn. That's how we are exposed to these options. And I think that's what a lot of men are not aware of. A lot of men only learned through this viral tweet what a vasectomy is to begin with. And that's shocking because we're adults and we should have known, we should have been speaking about this from an earlier age.
Absolutely. It feels like the bar is quite low, isn't it? Well, plenty has been said. I imagine plenty more will still be said, but that's the time we have our discussion this morning. Thank you so much. And good on you, Jacques, for starting the conversation, even inadvertently, so dare I add. But appreciate your time nonetheless. Jacques is an attorney, also wittingly calls himself a vasectomy influencer on social media. Also joining us there is Dr. Shingai Mutambirwa, who's a urologist. To both our guests once again, thanks very much indeed.